I've heard it said many times that Saul, as in King Saul, was Israel's first king. That is actually incorrect. I just wanted to share what the Bible actually says about who was Israel's first king. So if we go to Deuteronomy 33, verses 1 to 5, it says, "And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, The Lord came from Sinai and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them." So here, just bear in mind that especially in verse 2, he's talking about the Lord. Okay. Just moving on to verse 3. Yea, he loved the people. He's talking about the Lord, okay? And all his saints are in thy hand, and they sat down at thy feet. Everyone shall receive of thy words. Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob, and he was king in Jeshurun. That's verse 5. When the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. So here it mentions Moses, but before that it actually mentioned God, okay, and the Lord. But then here in verse 5 it says, "And he was king in Jeshurun." So it may look like it's talking about Moses, but it's said that this is actually talking about the Lord, okay? That the Lord was king in Jeshurun, okay? So so God was Israel's first king. Because the verse actually goes on to say, when the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. Okay, God was Israel's first king, and we'll actually see this mentioned elsewhere in the verses that I'm going to share. And then if we go to Deuteronomy 17 verse 14, "When thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shall possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shall say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me." So God already knew, was even predicting, God was predicting that the Israelites will actually choose to have a king over them, a human king over them. This is before they had a king. Okay, this is in Deuteronomy. This is chapter 17. Verse 15 goes on to say, "Thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone." God was even predicting that the kings that the Israelites would choose to have over them would actually be I think this is referring to how Israel would, because of transgressions, because of disobedience, will eventually God would allow them to be conquered by other nations, and even their kings that they were going to set over them will be taken to other nations, which their fathers have not known. So it goes on to say, "And there thou shalt serve other gods, wood and stone," these false gods. Judges 8 verse 30 says, "And Gideon had 70 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bare him a son, whose name he called Abimelech." So he is talking about Abimelech, who was one of Gideon's sons, but he was Gideon's son through a concubine. Verse 33, this is Judges 8:33. And it says, "And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a whoring after Baalim, and made Baal Berith their god." And in Judges 9 verse 6 it says, "And all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Milo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem." So when Gideon died, It says the children of Israel turned from following God and eventually made Gideon's son Abimelech their king. So that was the first human king that the Israelites had over them. What is the difference between Abimelech and Saul? The difference is that Abimelech wasn't anointed in the way that Saul was anointed. Or in other words, Saul was chosen by God. Okay, Abimelech wasn't chosen by God. If we go back to that text, the text that I read earlier, if I can find it quickly. Yeah, here Deuteronomy 17:15 says, "Thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose." Okay, Abimelech wasn't chosen by God. He wasn't anointed the way Saul was anointed. If we go on to 1 Samuel 8:4, it says, "Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him," so they were speaking to Samuel, and he said, "Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations." But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, "Hearken." To hearken means to listen, okay? "Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them." So bear in mind that God was their king. Okay, God was the king of the Israelites, but they rejected him. They wanted a human being because they said, "We want to have a king like all the other nations around us." I think what the problem was is that they wanted to have a king that they could see physically. They didn't want God to be their king because they couldn't see God. Okay, so they rejected God as their king, that he should not reign over them. And then 1 Samuel 8:19, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, even after he warned them what kind of king, what the king would do to them, and things like that, all the bad things that the king would do to them. They refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "Nay, but we will have a king over us." Okay, nay just means no. Okay, that's an old way of saying no. We will have a king over us. They were adamant. And verse 20, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Just like the modern day churches nowadays, they're all following after the Church of Rome, because they, want to be like, even the churches that started off well, especially the Protestant churches, are all following after the Church of Rome because they want to be like all the other churches, almost like they don't want to be left out, basically. And in 1 Samuel 11:15, "And all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal, and there they sacrificed sacrifices of peace offering before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly." Okay, so here we see that God was the king of Israel, but they rejected him. And even though they rejected him, God had already predicted, even in the book of Deuteronomy, that the Israelites would actually one day choose or decide to have a king over them, because God knows the future. So he knew they were going to do that because they wanted to be like the other nations. And he said, regardless of that, regardless of the fact that they would actually choosing to have a human king over them, they would actually be rejecting God. God said he was going to allow them to have a king, and he would actually be the one to choose who the king was. But before we have the first king who was chosen by God, who was Saul, we had Abimelech, who was Gideon's son. He also was made king by the Israelites, but he wasn't chosen by God. Okay, the first king to be chosen by God or anointed was Samuel. Was not Samuel. Sorry, Saul. So yeah, so it's not correct to say that the first Israelite king was Saul. Saul was the first anointed the first anointed king in Israel. But look at what happened with him as well. He he basically rebelled against God, and God forsook him, and eventually they had David as their king, who is said to have been a man after God's own heart. Not to say that he was perfect, but he acknowledged when he had sinned and done wrong, and he actually repented and asked for forgiveness. And that's how we are supposed to be. So that's what I wanted to share in this video. That there are a lot of these misconceptions, that there are some things that are even said as a mantra and believed by the majority of Christians, but when you look at it, that actually turns out not to be correct. So I hope that was a blessing to you, and thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next video.